start with a question. What is your role in home life? And how well are you functioning there? In the workplace, our roles are usually clearly defined and we know what we're meant to be doing, mostly. But when it comes to the home, many men are uncertain and largely opt out or are confused and unsure of their roles. Over the past decades, the focus has often been on the importance of mothers in raising children. However, more recent research has revealed how much fathers really do matter and how much they determine the way their kids turn out. So as dads, we need to understand how critical and essential our presence is in the development of our children. Mothers can't do it all on their own. And with boys especially, a mother cannot lead them over the bridge into manhood. Only a man can do that. And our daughters need us too for other reasons that we're going to look at in the following chapters. Research is overwhelming in showing that dads have to be involved to raise happy and well-adjusted kids. So where do we look to get the right model of manhood? Do we look to our own father? Well, that may or may not be the best model for some of us to follow. And society's values are scarcely going to be the model for a man of faith to follow. And so we need to at least start by looking at the timeless principles that the Bible gives us in this area of family life. What are the marks of true manhood? Robert Lewis writes a very interesting book, Raising a Modern Day Knight. And in one of the chapters, he uses the comparison between the first Adam and the second Adam, which is Jesus, to illustrate 4 important principles of manhood that help define who we are and what our roles should be as men. The first thing he says is this: a real man rejects passivity. The strange thing is that men who may be leaders in work, in business, in sport, in social clubs, and even church life can become passive when it comes to home life. Why? Well, it goes back to the headwaters of human history, to the Garden of Eden, recorded in the Scriptures, with the first Adam. God gave him a threefold responsibility: a will to obey God's commands, a work to do, tending the garden, and a woman to love, his wife Eve. And when his wife faced Satan's temptations, he opted out of his God-given responsibility and failed to step up to protect his wife and to lead her spiritually. Men have followed Adam's example ever since. Our fallen human nature makes us reluctant to step up to take spiritual leadership and responsibility in the home. We would rather just do our work and provide materially for our families. But we leave the spiritual leadership of home life to our wives. That's why the Bible is constantly calling men to rise up, to lead their families, to love their wives, and to take spiritual responsibility in training their children in the ways of the Lord. It's because this is our God-given role, and because of our natural tendency as men to become passive at home. The second thing that Robert Lewis talks about is a real man accepts responsibility. In contrast to the first Adam, Jesus came as the second Adam to do what the first Adam failed to do. Jesus was given the same threefold responsibility: a will to obey his fathers, a work to do to redeem the lost, and a woman to love, the church. And he accepted and fulfilled these responsibilities, resisting Satan's temptation to opt out or try an easier path. And he fulfilled his purpose with joy. As a Christian and as a follower of Jesus, He has given you the same model of manhood to follow. You can either become passive like Adam, or you can step up and accept the same threefold responsibility: a will to obey God's will revealed in Scripture, a work to do, our work in the world, and a woman to love, our wives. Our families need us to be men who model our lives on Christ, not on Adam. Your wife needs you to step into your God-given role. Your children need you to be their model and example of these same values. How powerful this godly influence will be in your home when your children see in their dad a man who lives in submission to Christ as Lord, a dad who regards his work as work done for Christ and His kingdom, and a dad who loves their mother and treats her with kindness and respect. Are you willing to accept that responsibility and step up to be that kind of man? The third thing, a real man leads courageously. It's easy after a hard day's work to come home and just disengage from family responsibilities. We can give our best to our work, but make little effort with our families. But home is not the place to step back. It's the place to step up and lead intentionally and courageously. This is where your presence and leadership is most needed and where your most important ministry begins. Men were created to lead, and this leadership begins in the home. Now, this has nothing to do with gender inequality or the husband ruling or dominating his wife. Both husband and wife are equal in God's sight. But in the home, someone must lead and take final responsibility. And in God's order for the home, He has given that responsibility to you as the man. The wife's role is to play her part, but in the end, she should support and encourage her man to lead. In fact, that's what most Christian wives want of their husbands. They want them to lead. One of the most commonly expressed concerns of Christian wives is this: I wish my husband would step up and take more spiritual leadership in the home. But how do we do that? How do we give spiritual leadership? In the chapter we looked at, we gave you 4 key biblical principles to apply. Simply this. Firstly, kneel before the Father. Live as a man under higher authority. Your surrender to God is the start of God's blessing flowing into your marriage and into your home. Second, love your wife. We looked at practical ways to do this in our last chapter when we talked about the 5 love languages. Thirdly, pray with and for your wife. This may be difficult to do, but we need to break through the pride barrier here and show we need to live dependently on God. Fourth, connect with your children. Play with them, get involved in their lives, and pray with them, and pray for them. And now, the 4th and final thing that Robert Lewis talks about, the principle of manhood, is a real man expects a greater reward. This has to do with the attitude and expectation we should have in fulfilling our roles as husbands and fathers. We can go about our role in home life begrudgingly as another burden to carry, or we can see it as part of our God-given purpose and do it with joy. Jesus fulfilled God's purpose with joy because, despite the cost and suffering involved, He saw the final reward in bringing many sons and daughters home to glory. And that should be your final goal and purpose, and mine as well. Men, I want to encourage you to step into your role and to live by these 4 principles of manhood. 1, reject passivity. 2, accept responsibility. 3, lead your wife and family courageously. And 4, keep your eye on the final goal, the final reward. Even if you have struggled and experienced conflict, pain, and even failure in your family life, it's never too late to make a change of attitude and a change of direction. With God's help, you can rise up to be the man God wants you to be. This may be difficult to do, but you can yet make a difference if you are willing to live God's way. Are you willing to give it a try?
So we looked in this chapter about stepping into my role as a leader, I guess, of my family. That's the way I sort of addressed it. And at first I sort of thought, well, did I even know I had a role when I first got married and had kids? Well, I didn't know what it was, didn't have a clue. So I think this has really helped me realise that I need to make a purpose or be active in setting out what my role should be. And it's even as simple as writing it down on paper, not just thinking about it randomly and letting it all just sort of hopefully fall into place as I pick up pieces in life, but being intentional about what my role is as a husband, as a father, and as a spiritual leader of the house. So this chapter especially helped me focus in on things particularly about my kids, I guess, about the consequences, what the consequences are if I don't step up in this role in a positive regard. I've got 3 young boys, and as they're growing up, you start to see the fruits or the lack of fruits in your labour sometimes, and you can see where you've gone wrong. And it's never too late, but you know that there are areas that, when you start to see areas that need to be addressed. So this has really helped me sort of zone in on that and understand just how important that is. It's an ongoing process. It shouldn't be just done once either, because a role's constantly changing as a family's constantly changing. You know, as children mature, as circumstances change. My role at the very beginning of our marriage is completely different to what it is now. We weren't even Christians then. It's a really, really serious thing, stepping into your role. You can't just go, oh, I hope it all works out. This is your family. This is your wife. It's paramount.
Yeah, one of the statements that stood out for me was kids want dads who are affirming and life-giving. And the affirming thing for me was part of what stood out, in that I believe I'm fairly positive with my kids, but I think sometimes I'm a bit maybe not intentionally affirming. I can tend to correct them and want the best for them. But when it comes to actually maybe sowing life-giving words and affirmation into their life, sometimes I feel like that stood out to me, and that was a bit of a reminder. And I think I need to be a bit more intentional in words, the spoken word. So that was definitely a bit of a light bulb moment. And also another interesting one, just down a bit further in the study, about underlined statements that you feel you need to step up more. Also, I wrote, I need to stand up for a little bit more and protect my wife in conversations. Now, it sounds a bit strange, but I think sometimes if my wife is talking to me about some issues she might have had with someone else, right, there's a tendency for me to want to kind of almost support or try and back up the other person that she's talking about, rather than acknowledge, her need for, I guess, support in the conversation. I don't know what it is. It's a strange one, that. So for me, it was, maybe I need to sympathise or empathise a bit more with what my wife's saying, and not look at the big picture too much and not analyse the situation. It's an unusual one, that one, but that's another thing that stood out for me. And the last one, the thing that I got out was maybe a little bit, for me, I want to look at a little bit more interaction, specific interaction with my kids and Bible side of things too. I pray for the kids as we go to sleep, and that's a special time, but I think I feel a little bit more direct input of biblical stuff, whether that be at the table or just be a bit more aware of my conversations and, weave God into stuff maybe a little bit more intentionally. I don't want to be too full on about it, because sometimes that turns your kids off if they feel like you're preaching. But yeah, so a lot of light bulbs went on in this study, but just about in every study. So it's been really good for me.
Praying for my wife and praying with my wife is something that I realised in doing the study that I just don't do, or I don't do enough. And I questioned why, and I thought, why don't I do that? And this sentence here just really spoke to me. It said, our pride and sense of independence makes us reluctant to show humility and dependence on God before our wives. And when I really thought about it, I actually thought that it really was something that I felt like I was showing a weakness if I couldn't solve the problem for Belinda, for my wife. And I felt like I was being weak by turning to God for help, when really I should be, in my mind, thought I should be doing it myself, that I'm not good enough, or I'm not strong enough, or I'm not able enough to help my wife. But I realised that that's just a really wrong attitude, and the very person I should be turning to first is God. I should absolutely turn to him at the very hint of trouble, and then he will give me the strength to be a greater husband again and support Belinda the way I should be. And it also shows strength to Belinda, to my wife, that I'm turning to God, and it shows her where my heart is. So that was something that spoke to me very clearly through that. And the last sentence, it's the spiritual partnership and dependence that gives marriage its real strength. So it's us partnering together to be dependent on God that gives us the strength. Not me, not my strength, not my ability, not my resilience or my strength as a man or whatever. It's actually our connection on a spiritual level and towards God.
Pretty early on, I worked out that I was responsible for the fruit of the marriage. So I set the tone, and what I got back was, from my wife, what I received back was a result of how I was in the relationship. So if I wasn't happy with something, then I took responsibility to say, what am I bringing into that space? How do I need to leave there to get a different outcome? So took that pretty seriously without much wisdom early on, and probably got a lot wrong, but I was on the right path. So setting the tone, I think Ian probably talks about it in the book, that wives will respond to the tone we set, and that's certainly what I found to be true. And as I said before, once I'm really in Fiona's corner, she knows I have my best heart for her, she can begin to blossom, really. It's safe to grow, it's safe to risk growing. But in the leading part for me was something else that some wise people had taught me along the way, that really the best gift I could bring to my family was my own healing. So we're broken, and we bring that brokenness into our marriage and our role as fathers. And I was capable of and doing a fair bit of damage. And so I sought that healing, and I sought God to do a restoring work in me. And it is quite a miracle to see that unfold. And even in recent times, I've just learned how to lead Fiona in that. So as a husband, leading her into healing. And that's a beautiful thing. It's the rescue story out of a movie, you know, it is. And yeah, it's beautiful.
So now we come to workshop time, and again I encourage you as you work through the questions together just to give your brief responses and to encourage one another as you explore this topic together. And then go ahead into the week to prepare for the next chapter that we come to next week. And I'll look forward to being with you again then. God bless you.